We have three types of deaths. We have homicides, suicides, and late discoveries. In a homicide, we're going to clean up all the blood traces. For late discoveries, we're going to remove all human biological fluid due to decomposition, suicides, and so on. And also attacks, when there are any, unfortunately.
What are the scenes you most often intervene on?
The scenes we most often intervene on are late discoveries. So these are women who have stayed, let's say, at least 5 days on the premises at most, as we have had 2 years on the premises. There are accommodations, they are so well designed that they are completely airtight, whether it's olfactory or auditory. So actually we don't smell anything, we don't hear anything, we don't see anything. Well, there you go. We once intervened at the home of a young man who had passed away. He had cut ties with his family and had been in the place for 2 years. So we would say, well, but 2 years, there's nothing left. There you go, it's dry. Well, anyway. Well, believe it or not, after 2 years, when we lifted the blanket and so on, it was still very, very damp. And it's an apartment where we had to redo everything in the apartment, take everything apart. Then there was the smell. We had the biological flows that had time to seep into the floors, under the partitions. And so we had to cut these partitions, remove the floors, and do other things in the housing to really make it healthy.
When there is a homicide, when do you intervene?
We intervene when the judicial obstacle is lifted. That is to say, the seals that we put on the entrance of the housing, quite simply. So there are two types of interventions. Either we are mandated by the family or we are requisitioned by the prosecutors. So the requisition, it is happening more and more now, but it's really in a very specific framework. Unfortunately, it's not for all families.
And generally, how long does it take to clean a scene?
Everything will depend on the damage we have following the death. So it can be a day or a half day, depending on what we have, and then it can go up to 10, 15 days. Depending on the damage, if we are going to have to dismantle certain elements, if we have fluid that has gone deep, then after there is the path of the fluid that we are going to follow, because between the point where there was the death, what we call the 0 point, where you had the death, you can have fluids that can be at the other end of the room, but only they have infiltrated under the floors, under the partitions. And gradually you dismantle, then you follow the path of this fluid quite simply. But then there are nuances after all. Between someone who follows himself in his bathroom, in his bathtub, who has slashed his veins and is found in the evening or the next day, and someone, let's say, who has shot himself with a hunting rifle, obviously it won't be the same thing.
How do you end up becoming a crime scene cleaner? What's your background?
I'm a former career military man. Then I did quite a few odd jobs, and then I ended up in the funeral industry by chance. I like being in contact with these families, being able to advise them, support them. And then considering what some families have told us within the funeral bridge, I thought there is something to be done. We really need to bring a quality of intervention to all these families, because it's not just a simple cleaning with a mop, a vacuum cleaner. Well, I could go on. Funerals and these interventions already have associated costs. The goal is for the operation to be done in one go so that afterwards they can actually turn the page. So when I say turn the page, I put it in quotes. It's in the sense that they can actually start their life over. Because when there is a death, whether it's a late discovery, a homicide, or a suicide, time becomes frozen. And as long as the housing where there are traces of the death is not dealt with, these families cannot rebuild and actually resume their lives. We learn to live with the absence of a person.
So, are you going to take care of everything related to suicides, travelers, for trains, etc.?
That's a great question. There's something I don't understand. We were contacted, I think I'm not the only company, we're not the only company to have been contacted by the Société Nationale des Chemins de Fer Français, saying within an hour following the suicide with the trains, because our drivers are affected and then it's not, our drivers are affected and then it's not a problem. We've never had a call, so I have no problem. We've never had a call, so I don't understand. It's very, very rare, in fact. We have that, but we didn't get a call to clean the premises. So then I'm willing to understand everything, but there comes a time when they call you to tell you this, and then they never call you. Even though we know very well that there are inconsistencies, there's something that's not consistent. There's something that's not consistent that my colleagues, they do it. I hope at least that my colleagues, they do it. I hope at least that someone does it, because otherwise maybe one day we'll wake up a little more, I don't know. But in any case, I really hope from the bottom of my heart that there is something to do. Is it after I know it's maybe not to do?
Is it, after I know it's maybe not necessarily easy, but do you remember the first scenes you cleaned up and the impact it had on you and how then you decided to evolve?
So there was a scene, it was a woman who died, but she committed suicide. To be totally transparent, she slit her throat. Her husband in the evening comes home to the house and he finds his wife lying in the bathroom with her throat slit. I'll let you imagine the scene he must have seen. So we get called, we arrive, we see what's happening. Unfortunately, the husband did not want to leave the house. So from that moment on, it was very complicated for us because we had to clean up all these blood traces with the screams. And that is very, 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 very difficult. It still affects me to this day. Well, you can say, yeah, he's a cleaner, there's nothing. He's a cleaner, there's nothing. They brand you with a hot iron until the end of your days, whatever happens. And this intervention was very hard psychologically, since I was with my wife also on this, that when you live this, in fact, you work in that. When you live this, in fact, you work in stress. But as you are on an intervention, so to speak, your brain, it is programmed to clean what? Try quotes, your brain, it is programmed to clean what? Trying the human machine is so well made that even if you are focused on what you are doing, everything you are going to hear or you are abstracting during the intervention, it comes back to you afterwards like a boomerang. So even years later, a cleaner is not a robot. A cleaner is a profession. You have to know it's a profession. You have to know it's where you are going to absorb all the emotions of the families that you are going to take care of. So that, to answer the question, is really one of the interventions that marked me. I have a second one that also marked us, but for my part differently. We intervened on a double homicide at the prosecutor's request. So I can't give the exact story, but it's the husband who killed his wife and daughter. We didn't have too many details at first, and then by talking with the people in charge of the investigation and all that, we did some small research as well to understand what happened. At New Group NAD, it's Homicides. That we carry out at New Group NAD, it's Homicides. We entered the house, we didn't know. We entered the house. We didn't know about that house. I immediately came face to face with the picture of this child and with the little blood. I had to turn the picture over so that I could work, since I'm a dad, that's it. And so that I can work, since I'm a dad, that's it. And in fact, this little girl looks like my daughter. So it's very, very difficult. You see, I'm still marked today as well.
But differently, that's it. So, when you arrive at a crime scene, do you over the years manage to roughly identify what crime could have been committed then?
Over all these years, in fact, we manage sometimes, not all the time, but we can identify the crime scene with its projections, if it was more or less violent, if we are more certain. Someone who would have been attacked with a sharp weapon that we can determine thanks to the microchips, simply, which can be projected onto the different surfaces. There's something interesting. It's that sometimes, like on sequences, sometimes the gendarmerie or the police need to find the bullet,
The
projectile of the firearm. But unfortunately, they can't get their hands on it. We arrive, we do our job. But as a result, we are really in the field of we eliminate everything. So we inevitably have more time than the investigator. So we therefore end up finding the warheads. And then these warheads, so these are the projectiles of firearms. We give them back to the investigator who was responsible for the investigation. That's it. Simply, it happens to us.
Where does the waste from cleaning go?
I burn them in my garden. The contaminated waste follows the path of the slaughterhouses. It's the hospital waste that Thanato also uses. They include drums or boxes that go straight into incineration with energy recovery. Since the goal is also directly in incineration with energy recovery, since the goal is also at our place, at the NAD group, then at the group, I don't know, but at our place, we have two things. It's to limit the impact on the human being and the environment. When taking any action, try to minimize negative impacts. So it goes through products. So we are going to use products that do not have VOCs. So these are volatile organic compounds, because we have already had illegal networks or
People who are hiding, who already had illegal networks, or people who are hiding their identity, who called you to clean up crime scenes.
yeah, I remember that, yes. So it wasn't long actually that we were open and I had a journalist with me. That's the worst part. And so the phone rings, I'm going to answer. I answer because my priority is to help a family in need on the other end of the line, even if I'm in an interview. It's not out of disrespect. Well, I pick up, and the first thing they tell me, word for word, listen, I've messed up. I need you to come clean up. Your price will be mine. I had the speaker on when the journalist came, which was good timing. I wanted to show her the potential of having a family. So she was what we could have with a family. So she was also stunned because she hears this. So I kindly explained to this gentleman, I told him, it's really nice of you to have thought of me, but I think it's going to take, and he calls on us. So he hangs up and then he calls us. So he hangs up and then tells me, yes, well, in the end, it's good. We have cleaned a bit, but could you not come to clean well? I explained that no, it's not going to be possible and he really needs to call the police because it's either a hoax or something really happened and he needs to call the police. I didn't have a number since he called me unknown. So it was complicated for me to call the police explaining the call I had. If I have nothing at all, you see, I am a cleaner on the other side of the fence. I do things within a legal framework. You can't do anything with this job. Because indeed, when we go through on a stage, we're going to remove everything.
Is there a smell on the stages? And if yes, how do you manage to bear it?
The recent discoveries have an odor due to the inevitable putrefaction. You're going to have people who will manage to bear the smell. Others won't. I think it depends on the person. Me, I can bear it. Sometimes when it's very strong, we're going to use other respiratory systems, like masks with a motor behind and a
Cartridge which
will allow to always send air continuously. It's certain that it's a smell that is striking for those who don't have decay. We will rather tend to avoid this decay. We will rather tend to avoid this smell, so not to enter the place, to back off.
For you, what is the strangest scene you've had to clean up?
So one day, we stayed, a lady who stayed a week stayed, a lady who stayed a week in the accommodation, and it's a lady who was sick. After a fall, she passed away, which is not uncommon during decontamination with many cases. During the decontamination, when we removed the floor coverings, we realized that in this housing there had already been another not to be
There normally.
because it does not correspond to that death. Here are the little strange things we can find.
I need to know how to commit the perfect crime. Besides, I need to know how to commit the perfect crime.
Besides, I know him, but I'm trying to clean it up. There are no investigators who are specifically in what we call cold cases, where they are there to find the authors of other crimes, but who are 15, 20 years old. The proof, we find authors of crimes after 20, 30 years. So there is no perfect crime. When committing a crime, mistakes are always made, even if the perpetrator believes otherwise. It can be very simple. You can very well cut yourself without realizing it. You can very well cut yourself without realizing it. You can do well like this. But it's true that if I had to commit a crime, I would know how to clean up.
Do you ever question what you're doing? Not at all. Why would I question what you're doing? Not at all.
Why would I be ashamed? I'm not embarrassed to talk about my job. On the contrary, I am someone who is my job. On the contrary, I am someone who is very open, and I am here to make people aware that this profession exists and that one can live a tragedy, whatever the death, when he has lived a tragedy, whatever the death, when there are traces due to death, a specialized company must be called in to deal with this problem. And so, as you were saying before, you have children. Yes, that's right. I have 2 children.
Have you opened up the dialogue with them about what you're doing? And if so, how did you do it?
Yes, because it's important to talk about that. We are in a country that is incredible. There are still in the 30s, 40s, we were taking pictures with our deceased anyway. You still need to know that. Before Kodak launched the first publicly available cameras. Nowadays, death has become a taboo subject that evokes fear and dread. But death in what it is, there is an end. And in me, I think there is an end. I believe it's crucial to prepare children for the reality that death is a part of life and that one day I will pass away. So it's important to talk about it, anticipate that I'm going to die. So it's important to talk about it, also plan things for our children. Because sometimes I don't have much prepared, so it's the children who don't have much prepared. It's the children, other family members or relatives who have to manage and arrange the funeral and everything that revolves around it. We must discuss death. I need to explain what it is. They'll have to cope on their own afterward. And then I explain death, what it is, and then I mainly talk about my job. So I still know some who will say, but he talks about his job to a 10-year-old child. I don't care. My children have already asked me to see pictures, even though there are scenes that are still very hardcore. The scenes remain intense, depicting the potential dramas that can unfold. They actually also see the dramas that can happen in life, and that life is something precious. Because the day you die, sometimes, if we had known, we would have talked. Sometimes, if we had known, we would have talked. But it's not now that we need to talk. It's necessary to put things into perspective a bit, and then more I think it's necessary to put things into perspective a bit, and then more I think to be closer to each other.
Why do you need to take pictures of the scenes?
So that makes a scene filing. It will allow us, if we make a scene filing, this will allow us, if ever there was any dispute, there has never been any, but if there was any dispute, to be able to bring the evidence of our work. So we do a scene filing before, during, after. This really allows us to show all the steps, and if the family decides to ask us for photo shots, that we can provide them with the photo shots, all that. Many people forget you do disinfection, you are responsible for life, for your intervention. Despite things that we can see in general conditions, or if after 48 hours the family has not objected to the intervention, they can no longer turn back, these ones, those ones. Finally, I see all sorts of things you should know, that you are responsible for life. If a family decides to turn against a person, they can do so without any issue. So we, as I said, are here to be very transparent, so we take these pictures.
We're going to talk a little showbiz. Have you ever worked on highly publicized cases? Yes.
Yes, and I imagine
That you won't be able to tell.
So it was a novel about Isère. So it was an attack. It was a person who kidnapped. It was an attack. It was a person who took people's lives with a sword in a butcher shop, tobacco shop, in the street. People who were on the ground floor in front of their window, actually. And then they got hit with a sword. So there, it's a bit of a special atmosphere after all. It's even a job that pays off, isn't it?
Could we have a job that pays off? Could we have a price range?
First, this job is not financially beneficial for me. The company benefits while you work for free. Unacceptable. Good, so a company can't have you work for free. No. Good. So a company can't have you work for free? No. Good. So a company can't work for free. In France, it is illegal to work for free or at a loss. While that doesn't exist, we can still work intelligently without it. So it can go very well from 5-6 to have. It can range from 5 to 600 euros to 20 to 25,000 euros. But when you do it, how much on average? We are between 1,000 and 1,500 euros per square meter. So our rates are not unreasonable compared to what needs to be done in the homes. And I repeat, if we have an intervention at 16,000 euros, for those who are going to comment, well, it's not me, the chief executive officer of the NAD group, who has these 16,000 euros. It doesn't belong to me. These 16,000 euros belong to it. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the company, so there you go. Afterwards, whether I make a good living personally, well, that's my life. It's like that. I give my life to families and to my company. You have to understand one thing. When you do this job, it's a job that is demanding, that takes all your time. And I do it willingly, all of this, since she also works in the company. But I give everything. Everything, I sacrifice a lot of things. Are you everything? I sacrifice a lot of things. Are you ready to sacrifice your life for those families? Answer this question, and then you might be able to do this job properly and above all correctly. But it's a life of sacrifice.
So how do you set your prices? What do you base it on then?
We don't operate by square meter. So we don't operate by square meter. It's going to be the time spent in the place, the consumables, the technical intervention vehicle. Inside it, you have about more than 25,000 euros of equipment. The consumption of yours, which is for hospital waste, which is soiled. So obviously, which is for hospital waste, which is soiled. So obviously, your intervention, if you go, I have a nonsense me, 3 hours of flow, it's sure it will be less costly than if you go, I have a nonsense, 42 hours, 150 flows, the number of countries you need in the week. It's in relation to the damage that the death caused. And it's important to understand there's what you see right away, and then there are the unforeseen. So what you don't see. So you see an intervention is still very complex. It's not just a simple mop-up and then I put a one shot of odor destroyer there or the mint, whatever you want. It's not or the mint, whatever you want. It's not on the fly. But you always do it in relation to on the fly. but you always do it in relation to the damage and the time you're going to spend in the place.
Let's talk a little about spirituality. What is your current view of death? Is it a fatality, an end, a continuity? And has it evolved with your profession?
So no, because I already had a vision of death before me. Why do we say that everything stops when we die? In fact, everything does not stop. I believe there is an afterlife. You may think I'm foolish for this belief, but that doesn't bother me. These are things that I experience, whether it's with my wife, who is in the field, or with other technicians. We sometimes experience a little bit strange things on our interventions. So I have a few anecdotes. One day, one of my partners, so it was in the living room. Suddenly, in the living room, one of my partners, and all of a sudden they actually saw in front of them a wine cork go from the kitchen to pull in the, we don't believe it, everyone does as they want, or we don't believe it, everyone does as they want, or we don't believe it, everyone does as they want, or there was more than the joists that crossed the building, and there was more than the joists that crossed the building, and so I was on a joist, and at that moment in me, from the corner of the eye, in fact, see my suit being pulled like that. The person who was thing, because once her, I saw her completely white thing, because once her, I saw her completely white in thing, because once her, I saw her completely white, standing on a piece of joist that was, I didn't remove my foot with the movement. That's where I had the piece of joist that fell simply. I don't believe it, everyone does as they please. Me, I don't believe it, everyone does as they please. Me, I live it. I don't live it every day, but I live it from time to time. And besides, that's why when I enter a home, out of respect actually, out of respect, because I'm not at my place, I knock on the door, I let them know that I'm there. And it's the least I can do. And I've often noticed when dealing with these phenomena, it's often following sudden violent deaths. These phenomena often follow sudden violent deaths. The deceased simply was not aware that he had died. It came suddenly, just like that.
What happens in the case where there would be a death and a family is not able to pay and they would not have the means?
So there are 3 types of families, you should know that. The first type, it's unfortunately, that's it, it's the reality. You have families who have the means but who want something very quick, which costs almost nothing. Then you have families who have little means but who want something top-notch. And where there is an inheritance behind, so they will be able to find themselves financially. There is an inheritance behind, so they will be able to find themselves financially. There are families who would like something good, but there is no inheritance, and then there is no money. And you see, it comes back to what I was saying. It all comes down to money, in fact. Money, everything revolves around that. So afterwards, we try to help them because we can't leave families like that. So afterwards, we always find a way to arrange to help them. And I repeat, and I will repeat it all the time, I repeat, and I will repeat it all the time. It's a job that must be done out of passion and not by
Reason. Over the years, has your job made you a cooler guy after all? It has to have made you a
cooler guy, it has to be said, there you go. But it taught me, in fact, to be, you talk to people, sometimes you realize you talk to people, sometimes you realize it's a play, it's acted. It just taught me to become myself and to be sincere, especially sincere with myself. The most important thing is being sincere with oneself.
Have you lost faith in humanity from seeing so many crime scenes?
Not at all, not at all. I do the job because I haven't lost faith in humanity. I would do something else, but I wouldn't do this job. The human being is good, originally. When we exist, we are innocent. Life makes us take different paths afterward. You're going to have people who are going to stray and who will come back. I wouldn't say on the right path because we're not sheep either. Others lived normal lives before.
Then you're going to tell me what is a normal life. Then they're going to slip up and there you go.
It's the nature of being human. Now I have faith in humanity. And once again, to do this job, you have to love humanity. Sometimes I tell myself in certain situations I had a similar experience. I have an anecdote where a man committed suicide after killing his dog. He committed suicide because there was a money issue and he thought that this money had been stolen or taken by someone in the family, and when the TV furniture and this wad of bills, he thought the TV furniture and this wad of bills he thought was gone was actually under the TV furniture. So we say there, it's a real waste. But the human being is a wonderful species when it decides to be reasonable. So it's been a while since we've been talking together, and I wanted to know, following this exchange, if you had a vision of the job before this exchange and if this vision has changed. And above all, outdoor crime cleaner, if we take the job of cleaner, me cleaner,
Outdoor crime. If we take the job of cleaner, I imagine myself talking to someone rather rigid, emotionally, let's say, a bit cold.
Physically or even in attitude, I imagine you a quite big problem and a bit of a tough guy, since she said it was a quite physical job.
It gave me an ultra sincere, ultra sentimental, and very touching image of this profession.
How I imagine you, I don't really know. I would say in your 50s or maybe a little less.
I had already come across a crime scene cleaner before. I remember a crime scene cleaner. And they were hot. That's not nice. It's not one. And they were hot.
That's not nice.
It's not, and who?
we're hot.
That it's
Not nice.
not a so I imagine you with hair.
Oh, I didn't imagine that at all. It's a canton because they're taken.
Down, I'm sorry.
Ah, well, hello. Hello, nice to meet you. It's me indeed. Otherwise, are you okay? No.